You don't want to get food poisoning at the end of the day. And you want, in person, what am I trying to say?
In your opinion?
Yeah, that. When you're a photographer, Hello and welcome to the Safari Shots podcast. I'm your host, Phileas Stain, and as always, here's my co-host, Lance van der Pfeiffer. How you doing, Lance?
Okay, wait a second.
Hello and welcome back to the Safari Shots podcast with me, your host, Lance van der Pfeiffer, and always my co-host, Phileas Stain. How you doing, Phileas?
Hey, how's it, Lance? How you doing, man?
Yeah.
Great to see you.
Yeah, same. It feels like we haven't seen each other forever because you have just come back from a month-long trip in Botswana.
That's right, eh? I did 26 days of overlanding through Botswana, visited some of the most iconic places there, like Kubu Island, Savuti, Kwai, Moremi. And because I'm calling it the Best of Botswana series, which will be on the Safari Expert YouTube channel in July, I had to visit Mashatu as well. So yeah, Perfect. I've been on the road for pretty much the whole of May.
Nice. So that actually is a really cool thing to talk about, because one of the biggest comments we've had in all of our videos is the difference between self-driving, which you've now got a lot of experience of, and lodges, which I have more experience of. So today we thought we'd talk about the difference between doing it yourself and having it done for you.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that it's literally, it's not comparing A versus B, because it's an extremely vast, broad, dynamic spectrum where you might have a local South African that have their own car that does a self-drive to Kruger, or you might have a foreigner coming out, they've got to rent a car to go to Kruger. Yeah. And you'll know with lodges, you know, not all lodges are the same. You've Absolutely. Got very inexpensive lodges in small areas and very expensive lodges in large areas. So as we unpack this self-drive versus lodges, it's important to mention that there are massive differences even within those two categories. I think this is going to be a great topic, because I think I'll maybe lean a little bit more towards the self-drive side and you lean a little bit more to the lodge side. Am I right?
Absolutely. So it's quite funny because we've got a lot of shared friends and we know a lot of people in this industry. And I get told a lot that I am spoiled and I don't like camping and They all seem to forget. I didn't grow up in South Africa, so we used to come a lot as children to see our family. And we always went to Kruger because I made my parents book Kruger at the end of the safari. And so my only sort of safari experience until I was about 24 or 5 or whenever I moved here and became a guide was self-driving. So my entire childhood up until teenage or whatever safari experience was actually self-driving. I didn't, to be honest, really even understand lodges until I started working in them. So I actually now, I agree with you. A lot of people will, when they think safari, they kind of think it's kind of like Yellowstone or Kruger, driving around, doing it yourself. Whereas a lot of people might actually not know what a lodge safari experience is. So I think it's a great topic. And we should probably,
absolutely.
Maybe for people who have never even thought about it, what would you say the main difference, obviously self-driving and lodges, is?
Well, so let's use the Kruger National Park as an example. The Kruger National Park, for those of you that don't know, is South Africa's biggest national park. It's one of the biggest national parks in the world, and it's about the size of Israel. So we're talking, it's really a country within a country. And within the Kruger National Park, or let's call it the Greater Kruger, you have this option to either go in your own car, i.e. self-drive, or you can go to a lodge and let someone else drive for you. And the latter usually gives you an all-inclusive package. So you get a beautiful room, someone else makes your food for you, and a trained guide is going to take you on game drives. Whereas when you self-drive, you typically also have to self-cater, find your own way, etc., etc. But if you ask me, Lance, I think the biggest difference, if you just had to choose one between self-drive and staying in lodges, is the cost. Without a shadow of a doubt, self-drive can cost you, 5, 10, maybe even 20 times less than when you go to a lodge. And for me personally, as someone that loves self-driving, that means I can go for longer. So if I have a budget, I'd much rather go self-driving because I can go to Kruger for 3 or 4 weeks even, as opposed to 2 or 3 nights in a luxury lodge. But, and this is coming back to the point that I made earlier, when you self-drive, it doesn't mean you only have to camp. Camping will always be the cheapest option, but you can also book a self-catering chalet, and there are even places where you can book a fully catered, option, but you're still driving on your own. So it's very varied. There are lots of different options, but without a shadow of a doubt, it's so much cheaper to self-drive than it is to stay in a lodge.
Yeah, we were actually chatting about it yesterday. Would you agree it's almost cheaper to stay in a self-catering accommodation than to go the whole hog and deck out your vehicle with a couple of $100,000 worth of stuff and do it yourself, where you set up your tent, you're on a rooftop tent, you have a fridge, you have all this stuff that you need to take versus, yes, driving yourself, but ending up in a nice chalet where you kind of just need to cook at the end of the day.
100%. And that's basically the difference when you talk just about self-driving. That's the difference between going to a place like the Kruger National Park that has all that for you. It's got the lovely self-catering chalet. It's got a restaurant. It's got a shop. So if you just want to buy some meat and you want to buy it at your unit, you don't have to worry about anything else. For all practical purposes, you can come from Germany, rent your car and drive straight to Kruger without having to take anything along. Versus what I just did in Botswana for 26 days, where I had to take everything with, because the campsites that I stayed at were wild campsites where in some cases we had nothing. We didn't even have a toilet. I had to dig a hole in the sand. That's where you go to the bathroom. So, and in that case, you're 100% right. Then it can add up because for some bizarre reason, probably because it's more exclusive, those campsites, those wild campsites are typically more expensive than a public campsite in the Kruger National Park, maybe 4 or 5 times more expensive, especially in countries like Botswana, Zambia, and further up in East Africa. And you're right, you have to then take all your food with you, so you need a fridge in your car, very expensive, a double battery system to run that fridge, a roof rack on the top for your second spare wheel and your jerry cans, etc., etc., etc. And before you know it, the whole overlanding game is very expensive. And even if you don't take your own car like I did, you can rent them through a company like Bushlaw or Brits or whatever. But it's expensive because you're now renting that car to get you to those places. So when it comes to cost, and this is, I think, what people want to know, is they want to know, what's the cheapest way that I can come to Africa? That's at least a comment that I've seen before. And that's it. Fly to Johannesburg, take a flight to Skukuza or to Hoedspruit, Eastgate here where we live, and rent a car from Avis or Europe Car or whatever. It can be a tiny little car that costs you next to nothing. The longer you rent, the cheaper it'll work out per day. And you drive straight into the Kruger National Park, and you've got shops, restaurants. The only thing is you might not be able to camp then because you don't have the kit. Avis is not going to give you a tent. But you book a self-catering chalet, and that's probably going to cost you no more than 1,500 Rand per night. So, I mean, what's that? That's not even $100 like per night for 2 people.
€12 or whatever it is. So
exactly.
You make a good point. So in self-driving, there's basically almost 2 categories. There's the, I just want to be behind the steering wheel, but I don't necessarily want to build a house when I get to wherever my campsite is. And then there's kind of more the hardcore explorer. It's more about driving than it is necessarily about safari. You want to be involved with your vehicle. You kind of got that mechanical itch in the back of your head as well.
Yeah. I think I'll agree and disagree with you at the same time, because having just done that latter thing you've spoken about, the hardcore overlanding, the more expensive overlanding, self-driving, I don't do it because I want to drive 4x4. Believe me, I don't like driving in thick sand. I don't like driving through water because I'm always scared that I'm going to get stuck or get broken down.
This is why you rent someone else's car.
I do it because I want to experience the wildest places out there, with me in control. And I think that's, for me, that's the most important thing about self-drive and my personal reason for self-driving. It's not necessarily to save money. It's so that I can get to these wild places like Moremi and Savuti and Kwai, but still be in control. I'm not with another guide that sets my departure time and how long we stay there and decide where we go and look for things. I'm in control. If I want to go out the whole day, I go out the whole day. If I want to go out just for half an hour, I go out for half an hour. And as you know, my main goal is to see animals. I go to these places so that I can see lions and leopards and elephants and hippos and all these things. And I think the difference is you're talking about a very big portion of self-drivers that love driving and cooking and, getting to a wild place and just sitting in the campsite and making, a big potjie, a stew or something like that for hours and just enjoying the view. So
my father-in-law.
It's very important to note that there are lots of different reasons why people do this.
Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of brings me back to one thing. You said you're not with another guide. You're being independent. So one of the questions I would have to you, if you are a complete foreigner to wildlife, you don't understand animal behavior, how easy, how likely would it be to get yourself in trouble? You might not understand animals. You might not notice the animals coming into your camp, for example. I know for a fact your camping is unfenced. That's one of the biggest difference with camping. You're under a tree. So a hippo might come sniff you in the head in the night through your tent, for example.
And they did.
And they do. Yeah. So would you say if you're a complete novice, Kruger would probably be better and then staying in a chalet versus wild camping like you did?
Yeah, that's such a good question. It's the right question to ask because without a shadow of a doubt, it must be incredibly intimidating for someone coming from a foreign country to Southern Africa and to jump straight into overlanding where you are wild camping because the challenges are not just wild animals. It's tough roads, it's bureaucracy at the border,
it's maps,
maps getting lost so easily. We nearly got lost with SatNav, with Tracks for Africa, navigating us. So absolutely, there's no doubt in my mind that if you're a first-time self-drive visitor to South Africa or Southern Africa, go to a place like the Kruger National Park where you can buy a map at the gate that's extremely well marked. All the junctions are marked. You're driving predominantly on tarmac roads or very well-maintained gravel roads, and it's pretty much impossible to get lost. Yeah. And I think even from an animal behavior point of view, the animals in a place like the Kruger National Park are so used to vehicles that your chances of getting in trouble if you stick to the rules, i.e. stay in your car, you've got a much bigger chance, getting sick on the trip than you have, running into any serious kind of trouble. So I reckon that's definitely a good option. But having said that, I bump into these brave people that come overlanding, off the bat without any previous experience, but I do also see them struggling. Came across two couples on this trip that got basically lost on the Mahari Pans the whole day on this trip. Bumped into another couple that drove nose first into the water at a water crossing because they didn't wait for someone to show them what the right line was. So as we got there, found a truck, a bakkie, just standing straight into the water like this. There was a hippo hole, just straight into the water.
This is why you rent someone else's vehicle.
But Lawrence, I want to throw the question back to you because we've now made self-drive sound wonderful, but what do you think is the main disadvantage of self-driving and why do you gravitate towards lodges as opposed to self-driving? But tell me why you don't like the self-drive. I'm not asking yet why you like the lodges. Just what is it about self-drive that you think is a big disadvantage?
So for me personally, most of the self-driving that's available to me easily is Kruger. It's the closest. I know it very well. And that is the biggest disadvantage is it's Kruger. For me, Kruger is not what it used to be when I was a kid. When I was a kid, you used to go out for 2 or 3 hours on a game drive by yourself. You would see maybe 2 or 3 vehicles. Now, if you find a cat, you're lucky to not have anywhere less than 50 vehicles. And half the time, you don't even know what you're looking at. We had a sighting the other day. I say a sighting. We pulled up the other day. We talked to the back vehicle. What do you guys see? Because we were just trying to get home. Oh, it's lions. It's just here somewhere. We pulled up another 10 vehicles. What have you guys seen? Oh, there's a leopard somewhere here. We pull up next to a safari vehicle. What have you seen? He doesn't know. The guy in front of him stopped. There was about 60 vehicles parked on the side of the road. There was no animal. I promise you there was no animal. Nobody knew. Every single, because we look at them while we're driving past. Well, every single person's looking in a different direction. They had no idea why I was there. Somebody stopped, probably for a bird, drove away. The next vehicle stopped, and then there was a traffic jam. So the sightings things drives me nuts in Kruger. Don't get me wrong. You can have some amazing sightings in any national park, any reserve. You can have some amazing sightings. The biggest difference in self-driving, let's use Kruger for example again now, is that you're on a tar road or a gravel road, but you're on a road. So if the lions are beautifully lined up facing that way and your road is here, guess what? You're not seeing their faces. You're not going to be able to take photos. And for me, it's about photography. If I'm going into a wild place, I want to take photos. I mean, I'll never say never, because you can see some of the photos that come out of Kruger are incredible. It's just those maybe 5 to 10% of the sightings are great photographically, whereas in a private reserve where the guide can drive you around the bushes in front of the animal, we can set up. If we see a shot coming, we can get in position and make a shot essentially. Your success rate photography wise, and at the end of the day, again, that's why I do it, is so much higher. So that's one main reason. And then wild camping wise, I think it's better sightings wise, because you're in the middle of nowhere. There's less roads, there's less traffic. It feels wilder because it is, and the sightings you have are ridiculous. The problem is I don't have a vehicle for it. I don't have a rooftop tent. I don't have a fridge. I don't have the will to put up a tent every day and sit in 45 degrees and cook. I would rather go and have another guide drive me around. What would you like to see? Oh, I would like to see this. Are we bored? Yes, let's go and see this now. And then I would like to go and have somebody else cook for me, and I can sit in the pool or relax in the aircon. So, I would say if you're more into sort of higher luxury things, not self-driving, but wild camping is not for you. Because you can still stay at some very nice places and drive through Kruger. Like there's some hotels just outside which are beautiful. There's camps inside which are beautiful. Where you don't have to do anything yourself. But then you've still got to go and find your animals and deal with the other vehicles.
Well, I think for some people, part of the fun lies in the finding the animals themselves. So if you are a wildlife photographer like you and I are, self-driving gets very frustrating for all the reasons that you just mentioned. The fact that you can't off-road, and there's traffic jams and all that. And without a shadow of a doubt, going to the lodge is going to give you a much higher hit rate. I mean, you and I always used to say, you can spend 10 times the money to go to a lodge and go for, let's say you can afford 4 nights at a lodge versus a month in Kruger, but you're still going to come back with better photos in those 4 days than you would have in that whole month in Kruger, because you can off-road and park in whatever position you want. But there are definitely people that like the thrill of looking for animals themselves, and I am one of those people. I love going to Kruger and seeing whether I can find a cheetah or a wild dog, thinking about the different habitats and time of the day and so on. And I think the advice that I would give to people who are concerned about all those crowds is there are ways that you can avoid it, at least to a certain extent. The one is to stick to the quieter part of the park. So the northern half of the Kruger National Park specifically is definitely quieter than the southern half. But having said that, game viewing is a little bit tougher. It's just not as high densities. But the best way that you can do it is to avoid school holidays. Ooh, yeah. And the most popular time in the Kruger National Park, at least, but actually in all southern African parks, is the winter months. So from May all the way through to, I would say, late September is by far the busiest time. And within that, there's the Easter holidays, March, April, then there's the winter holidays, the days typically in June, July, and then there's again holidays in September and October. So jumping onto Google before you make your booking, and just avoiding the South African school holidays will already help. So if you're coming to Southern Africa, and you travel from November to March, I would say, you're going to have half the vehicles, if not, even less vehicles around. But, and it does come with a but, it's hot, it's potentially rainy, and there are some bugs. So you just have to prepare yourself with that. But that's just the nature of the game. Yeah. You're going to have to sacrifice a few things and, to gain in the other. And I think the unfortunate thing about places like Botswana, because they don't have the great road infrastructure, if you do go during those low season months, the wet months, you've got a real chance of getting stuck, as I saw in January when I went to the Chobe National Park during the rains. So it's only really places like the Kruger National Park where the road infrastructure is so good that you can go during the wet season without having to stress about water.
Yeah. So you actually made an interesting point there, that because you're a wildlife photographer and you're a bush guy, that you like to feel like you're finding the animals. Oddly, I feel like I'm helping find the animals so much more on an open safari vehicle at a lodge than I ever have anywhere self-driving. And I'm lucky. I've got good eyes. I can spot a leopard in a bush 100 meters away. I don't know why I have that gift, but I have that gift.
It's because you're not 40 yet.
maybe next week so driving around self-driving, you can't track unless you're on the gravel roads. But even then, you see a nice line track. Wow, it looks really fresh. It's gone. Oh, it's gone off the road that way. It's gone. So for me personally, I feel like I'm looking for animals in the Kruger or on self-drive, versus when I'm at a lodge, I feel like I can help find the animals. So obviously we've done a lot of safaris. We know how to track. We like getting off with the trackers. The nice thing is, if you've got a really nice guide and tracker and a lodge that allows it, if you're a guest who wants to know how to do it, the tracker will show you. He will climb off. He will show you the footprint. He'll show you how he identified the footprint. He'll show you the direction it's going. And then you're involved. It's like part of the game. You see how excited the guide and tracker get when they find fresh leopard tracks or whatever, or fresh wild dog tracks. And all of a sudden the radio is going nuts because the guys are trying to outsmart an animal by looking at dirt. So for me, I love that, and I don't get any of that self-driving unless it's wild camping, because then you are the only person, and if you find tracks, you can kind of get somewhere. But yeah.
Well, I think that's the whole point, is that, and again, brings me back to the first point that I made, is that there are these different options. So in Kruger, you're 100% right. You're not allowed to get out of your vehicle, even to look at the track. And the blocks are enormous. Yeah. So if the track's going to this direction, you're not going to drive around to the next road and find it. You'd be very lucky, because that's a 2-hour walk for the animal to get to the other road. But where I just came from, where we were in places like Moremi and Kwai specifically, the road networks are extensive. And I think the reason for that is because there are lodges there as well. So you have to remember, when we self-drive now in northern Botswana, we did come across lodge vehicles. It's one of these weird places where it's a little bit of a mix and match. And in some places we weren't allowed to off-road. In other places like the Kwai community, we were allowed to off-road. But I could at least, if I found tracks, I could, one, get out without having to feel like I have to watch over my shoulder because I'm breaking the rules. I'm actually allowed to get out and have sundowners and stand next to my car. And secondly, the blocks are so small that I could literally just drive around and see whether the tracks are there. So yes, it's the more difficult, more expensive type of self-driving, but it's filling that need, because I'm exactly like you. I love that excitement of finding something myself. The only difference is I now don't have radio contact with anybody else that's going to call me in.
I think we're also forgetting, though, that me and you, or you and I, or we, are not necessarily the same as probably 99.999% of safari goers who are coming from overseas. They've never thought of looking at the ground to see a track. Which case, a lodge is going to be much better. You sit in the back, the guide drives you around, he's explaining nature to you. This tree does this is this bird, blah, blah, blah. Oh, look, a leopard track, and 10 minutes later, here's your leopard. Enjoy it. Versus,
yeah. Well, I'm gonna take a guess and say that 90% of our viewers that have asked about self-drive versus lodges, for them it's got nothing to do about the desire to drive and experience it on search on your own versus someone else doing it for you. They're asking it because of cost.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it comes back to cost. So here's my question to you. You know as well as I do that a lot of the questions that we get are about where can I go to see the big five, but not, it's not going to cost me an arm and a leg and a kidney and a nose and an ear and my dog's legs. So what do you say to people, or how would you say you make the decision about how much you pay for a lodge experience? Because you know as well as I do, literally just in a 50-kilometer radius from where you and I stay here in Hoedspruit, there's probably 150 lodges, and I'm not even joking, to choose from.
More,
and they vary from, I'm going to take a guess and say, if we're talking fully catered only, it probably varies from $400 per person per night to maybe not, but probably close to $4,000 per person per night. How do these fully catered lodges differ? And what's going to be the difference between the guy that's paying $400 per night, which we'll say, I know it's all relative, but that's inexpensive, versus someone that's paying $1,500 a night, which is more your upper end lodges in places like the Sabi Sands?
Yeah, so that is a great question, because we actually get it all the time. Because normally when people come to us and ask for a quote, if they don't really have a particular reserve or whatever in mind, we normally give them a couple of options. So again, at the end of the day, it comes down to the experience and the whole experience. People forget that when you're on safari, it's not just about seeing the animals. There's a lot more to it. So you want to be comfortable at the end of the day. You don't want to get food poisoning at the end of the day. And you want, in person, what am I trying to say?
In your opinion?
Yeah, that. Jeez. So in my opinion, when you go on safari, and doesn't matter how many safaris you've been on in your life, you should learn something. If you go away and you haven't taken away something new with you, probably wasn't a good safari. And the higher, so this gets a little bit weird. So the higher cost you pay are normally the higher end lodges, which normally have the better guides. So that's one side of it. So if you go to a place like the Sabi Sands, which is arguably the best game viewing in South Africa, it's got the best habituated cats. Almost every cat there is habituated so well that it doesn't even look at you while you're driving around it, getting in position. So for photography, it's tip-top notch. And there's a lot of them. And the terrain in the Sabi Sands allows you to find them easily because the ground is beautiful for tracking. And then once you've found them, you can follow them. Once you start going to lesser, I don't want to say less good reserves because they're not less good. Once you start going sort of down tiers price-wise, so I would say the next best safari reserve in South Africa would be, well, in the Lowveld, let's say, because we don't do too much on the other side of South Africa, would be the Timbavati. I don't know if you'd agree with that. So I would put it Sabi Sands first, Timbavati very close second. But once you get into the Timbavati, it's quite interesting. You'll know because you've done a lot as well. It's not as easy to track animals, and it's not as easy to follow animals. Plus, Sabi Sands, you're allowed three vehicles in a sighting. Timbavati, you're allowed 2. So your sightings are actually a little bit shorter in the Timbavati because you've got more guys lining up, pushing you out.
Yeah.
Sabi Sands are a little bit longer, and you tend to find more, I would say, in the Sabi Sands tentatively because you can have good days everywhere. Because there's more guys who are allowed to help look.
So maybe a way to summarize it to people who are trying to understand this price difference, because I know I can see them getting frustrating because of this price difference. They're like, but why would I pay $1,000+ per night to go to a Sabi Sands lodge versus the $400 in Balule or another place like this? Maybe the way that they should think about it like this: the more you pay, Of course, the nicer your lodge is going to be. So it's going to be a very luxurious lodge with amazing food and chefs and room and so on. Very often your guide is going to be better.
Yes.
This is just a fact. So these higher end lodges attract very experienced guides who are very well trained. And that comes back to what you said about learning something. So you're going to have a very, very good host on your vehicle that really has the emotional intelligence to give you the experience that you want.
Yes.
If you're a photographer, he's going to park in good positions. If he sees you're a bird watcher, he'll pick it up and he'll, help you find birds. So it's great accommodation, great food, great guide. But then the more you pay, typically the bigger the traversing area is that you can drive. So in other words, it's the difference between having 10,000 hectares versus 2,000 hectares. So not only a bigger chance of finding different leopards of different pride of lions, but also different habitats. So prettier areas, more riverbeds, more rocky outcrops. That all comes with the price. And then in many cases, exclusivity, like a place like Mala Mala or Mashatu. You go there and you're not competing with other lodges, and that means you don't have to fall into some kind of alignment. Then on top of that comes the whole thing that you spoke about, that you have these habituated animals. So animals that have been viewed so often that they increase the chances of being found and then being watched and photographed. So let's take it on the reverse. Now you say, okay, I don't want to pay $1,500. I only want to pay $900 or $800 per person per night. And I know a lot of you are listening and you're saying, oh my goodness, but that's still way too expensive. I understand. Remember, this is all relative. It's all on a scale. And we're trying to work backwards from people who can afford those high rates. Now we're down to $900, and maybe we can't afford something in the Sabi Sands and we're crossing over to the Timbavati. So what's happening now, first of all, the landscape changes. You said it, you mentioned to it. The landscape's a little bit, it's a bit rockier, it's a little bit denser, or it's a little bit more homogeneous. In other words, you don't have the great diversity. The more varied the habitat, the more the species diversity is. So now you're moving into more homogeneous Mupani veld, which is a very dense, difficult to track in area. Look at Lance's face. And that means lower animal densities. So not as many leopards and lion prides, but also slightly shyer animals because you can't follow them off-road or track them easily, so they see people less often. So immediately your hit rate drops a little bit. And it's not as scenic as it was when you were further down in the Sabi Sands. And now, because the traversing area is now half or a third or even a quarter of what it was down in Mala Mala, or whatever reserve or lodge you visited in the Sabi Sands, now suddenly this lodge has to share with that lodge and that lodge and that lodge. So they have an agreement where they all drive on each other's property, but that means they also have to share the sighting. So suddenly your guide turns to you and say, yes, I'm really sorry guys, but we only have 5 minutes left with these wild dogs. And you know, but they haven't even stood up yet. Why would I leave now? And the reality is, as $900 becomes $700, becomes $500, becomes $400, you're moving further away from these large areas that's easy to find animals to rockier areas, denser areas with very small concessions. And yes, they do have the big five. And yes, you do have a chance of finding the big five. But the reality is your hit rate is really low and you might come away not even having seen a leopard, let alone photograph a leopard. So when you come and you say, my budget is only $200 or $300 per night, and I want to go to a lodge, I almost want to say to you, why don't you just rent a car and go to Kruger? And you have the size of Israel to drive, albeit on your own, but you might actually be able to go for a lot longer and actually have, a lot better sightings.
Yeah, which is totally fair. Yeah. One of the other things you mentioned, the bigger, higher, more high-end reserves. Often it's only that company driving on that one property. And you often find also that those guides almost work together better because they're not competing with a different company. It's all the same brand. So when you're a photographer in particular, and you want to spend time with an animal, those are the places who will say where your guide will tell the other guides, listen, we've got photographers. We only want to sit with this leopard. We're not planning on doing anything else. Please let us stay here. You guys can all come in and out, but we don't want to leave. Those are the places where you've got the best chance where the other guides will say, cool, absolutely. Where you've got a lot of guides who are working from different companies sharing traversing, they don't really have that option because it's in the rules, it's in the terms. If one guy pushes his luck one time, he's now known as that guy. The other lodges then try and push their luck, and then it all goes tits up very quickly. So it's a lot more strict.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think there, again, if someone approaches me and say, I want to come on safari, and I ask them, the first thing I ask them is, well, I first always ask them, what do you want to see? What do you want to see and what do you want to photograph? Because typically it's photographers that approach me. And then the next question is, what is your budget?
Yes.
But I would always lean towards those reserves that have exclusive use, whether that be a Mala Mala or a Mashatu game reserve, for all the reasons that you just mentioned. The reality, unfortunately, is that that is for the 0.1% of people that can afford it. And I would say the majority of inquirements I get, at least, fall a little bit lower than that. Yeah. And that's when you have to start looking at other options where there is the shared traverse. So what I then typically look for is a place where it's either extremely beautiful, and there are certain areas, like I actually really love the Timbavati. I love driving along those riverbeds. It's nice and open. In many ways, it's prettier than the Sabi Sands because it's more open. But I also look for camps that offer you that something slightly different. A place like King's Camp in the Timbavati has an underground photography hide, which some people may have seen on the Safari Expert YouTube channel. And you and I have actually done a podcast there as well. And they've recently added a photography room as well. So if you are going to share traversing, there are other things that then, give you let's call it a photographic edge when you're doing wildlife photography, like access to an underground hide. And we'll talk a little bit more about King's Camp later because Lance and I actually have a safari there next year. We'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. Or it could also be a place with a guide or guides that you know really well, people that you get along with and that understand how you do business. So that's something that Lance and I will always do. At least I know I do this, Lance, is when I put a safari together, I always try and go to a place that I know and where I know the guides so that we already have some kind of game viewing relationship that will then make your client's experience that much better.
Yeah, absolutely. We very rarely send anywhere where we haven't been before, unless it just falls out within under the budget and it's impossible and it's kind of their only option. We're also lucky we've been to most places, so we know we have our favorite guides. We even know at certain places as well. One thing we forgot to mention with the price, if you're going to a lower end price range lodge, you are almost guaranteed to be in a vehicle where every single seat is full. So the back of the vehicle's got 9 seats. There's also one next to the driving guide, which is often full as well. So you can have 10 people on a safari, which doesn't sound bad until you're at the back right and the leopard's at the front left and you're shooting through 7 heads to try and get a photo. Whereas I say medium range, but it's probably top 30% range of lodges now. They put like a maximum of 6 guests on the vehicle. So everyone has a window seat. There's an empty row in the middle, which is great. You can put your gear there. A lot of them have these nice big boxes so you can put stuff inside so you don't lose your phone or your camera while driving in the bush. And then what's really difficult for us is, as photographers, we want to be alone. We want to go to places where we can pay for the rights to have an exclusive use vehicle so that it is myself, the guest, the driving guide. We get to say where we go. We get to say what animals we want to look for. We're the only ones there, so you're not competing with, I want to go and look at lions. No, but I want to go and look at this butterfly over here.
Yeah.
That's where it gets difficult because that gets expensive quickly. You're basically paying the lodge to not put people on the vehicle. So some of the lodges you're paying, the average price throughout Africa is probably about $600 a day now for that. Some of them are $3,000 a day, $2,000 a day. That gets expensive quickly.
It's crazy. I mean, it's stupid expensive. Yeah. And I think the reality is, people always ask me, but how can you justify that price? It is because, like you just said, these are now seats that they're not filling.
Yeah.
In other words, that vehicle otherwise would have had other people on it.
Sometimes rooms. Yeah.
Well, I think, yeah, exactly. But I think also if there is an extra vehicle to accommodate you, that vehicle doesn't cost $10,000. That vehicle costs $100,000 for them to kit out.
Yeah.
So they're paying off that vehicle with your exclusive use rate. So that's what it all boils down to. But
sorry, a lot of them as well, they have to pay extra traversing every time they put another vehicle on, or they don't have the option. So if it's a 3-vehicle lodge, they can have 3 vehicles. But if you now want this one exclusively, then they block off the 5 rooms or whatever it was that they were going to fill that vehicle with. So now you're basically telling the lodge, don't put guests in who are paying you money because I want to be alone. So I understand it, but it's also rough.
We're now talking again to the the people that really have big budgets and they're thinking, well, is it really worth it for me to spend that extra? Because now they're already coming to these super expensive lodges where you have all those advantages that I mentioned earlier. My answer is to you, absolutely it's worth it, because when you do have sole use of a vehicle, and especially when you're with a photographic guide like myself or Lance, you can literally go out and do exactly what you want to do.
Yeah.
If your dream shot is to have a leopard jumping out of a tree, you could literally go out and look for a leopard day in and day out until you find one in a tree and then sit there until it jumps out.
Yeah.
That's what you can do if you have exclusive use. And yes, that might sound silly, but for a lot of people coming, they do come with those dream shots.
Yeah.
So there's something very special and wonderful about having sole use, and Lance and I take a lot of clients on sole use trips, and for me those are my favorite safaris by far, because when you do, you'll know this, when you have 6 people on the back and let's say it's 3 couples, very seldom do they have exactly the same objectives. Some want to photograph birds in flight, others want to photograph big cats, and others just, they want to see some elephants as well. So someone's always compromising as you go on drive. These guys are waiting for the roller to take off, and those guys are now, driving in circles, tracking, because we really want to see a leopard. And there's no right or wrong there, but it can be frustrating, and not even to mention personality clashes. And that brings me back to self-driving. And the reason I like self-driving so much is because it's just me and my wife, or me and my friends, and I basically have sole use. I'm in my own car.
You have all
I'm
the
in
personalities you need.
Exactly. So that comes back to that very selfish thing where I leave when I want to leave, I look for what I want to look for, and I can spend as much time or as little time with what I find myself. So, but the reality is the options are absolutely endless. And what I can highly, highly recommend is when you get to the point where you are ready to do a trip to Africa, and for a lot of you, it might be your first time, is just spend some time doing your research. If you're going to self-drive, there's tons of videos that help you with tips on which camp to choose, what time of the year. A lot of them are on my channel, the Safari Expert YouTube channel. I have a whole Kruger National Park playlist and videos about places like Kwai and Muremi and Savuti, to show you which campsites to use and what roads to drive and so on. And if you're going to come out to a lodge, yes, you might do some wonderful self-research on YouTube, but you have to remember that a lot of the stuff that the lodges post will be sugar-coated. And definitely the websites will be very, very sugar-coated. So they'll bombard you with things like, Big 5, Greater Kruger, this and this. But the reality is, you might get there and be very disappointed. So reach out to people like me and Lance and ask us whether or not you book a safari with us or not. That's irrelevant. But we are here and we have the knowledge and we are available to help you make more educated decisions about coming to Africa. Because if we come to your country, if we fly to India to view tigers, or we fly all the way to Canada to come and see bears, we also want to get bang for our buck. And that's what we're here for. We're here to help you make better decisions, whether that's just listening to this podcast or whether it's actually booking a safari through Panthera Photo Safaris or the Safari Expert. Do use the opportunity to reach out and drop some comments down below what your feelings are about self-drive versus lodges as well. Ask as many comments as you want. Ask as many questions as you want. We're very happy to answer them in the comments down below as they come through.
Yeah. So. Two more things. You touched on one. So one of the things some people don't understand, and I get this question quite a lot, booking safaris, is most people don't understand that you can only get into certain private reserves as a lodge experience. So like Sabi Sands, Timavati, Boluli, all these places, you can only enter these reserves if you're staying in a lodge. Whereas self-driving and things, it's mostly national parks. So a lot of the places we get it all the time. Can I self-drive through Sabi Sands? No, you can't. Anywhere private in Southern Africa, you have to book as a lodge experience, which is important to know.
That's mostly South Africa, because where we were in Botswana now, yes, places like Mashatu, you're right, it works the same way, but around the Delta, of course, when you go deep into the Delta where vehicles don't reach and you go to the Mombos and the like of that, you won't be able to reach that. But Savuti, Hwai, Muremi, all those places, it's different because you can actually self-drive there. And it's the same in South Luangwa and Etosha and places like that. So, but it creates this very weird atmosphere and weird situation where you now have self-drivers and lodges competing. So the guy who's just paid $1,500 is seeing me in Tom Cruiser, my Toyota Prado, that's paid, I don't know, I paid $50. But we're in the same sighting. Yeah, so that does create quite a weird setup, and I kind of have mixed feelings about it. When I'm in my own car, I think to myself, oh, this is nice, I can go where the lodges go. But when I'm in the lodge, I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, I don't really want to share this with the self-drivers. Yeah. So the reality is, and this goes for all the way from the cheapest, which is camping in the Kruger National Park, which will probably cost you, I don't know, less than $20 per person per night, to the upper end, there's always going to be a sacrifice. Yeah. The most expensive lodges, the big sacrifice is the fact that it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. Yeah. Camping in Kruger, it's going to be those, it's very busy sightings and so forth. So there's always something that you're going to have to sacrifice or a compromise that you're going to have to make to slot into whatever it is that you want to experience. And I think that's the most important thing. So when someone comes to me and say, I want to go on safari, you have to ask the questions. What do you want to see? Do you want to photograph something specific? Is it about the photographs or is it about the experience? And all you have to ask yourself, why do you want to go on safari? Yeah. What is it that you want to experience? Is it budget? So that you have to ask yourself those questions. Otherwise, it's very hard to narrow it down.
And time is quite important too. A lot of our clients, especially places like the USA, they only get like 2-3 weeks of holiday a year. So if they're coming, maybe they're coming for a week. They want to do a bit of Cape Town. They want to do a bit of a city. Then they want to do some safari. So time-wise, you're much better off going to a lodge, in my opinion, because you can fly in, get picked up, taken around, drop back off, fly back out, and it's all over before you realize it started. And then one of the things you touched on a little bit before is knowledge. So if you want to do self-driving, you kind of need to plan the whole thing, but you might not necessarily understand the place. Whereas a guided experience through lodges, if you contact someone like Filia or myself to plan a safari for you through lodges, we can recommend something that fits you perfectly. Whereas when you're doing it yourself, that's all on you. And then one last very important thing that I think it's becoming more and more and more important, especially after COVID, especially with the troubles in a lot of African countries with their economies and things like that, is the community factor. If you're going to a lodge these days, almost any lodge, part of your money is going into the local communities, which helps curve poaching. It helps the local communities get educated. It helps put water in. It helps put electricity in. Whereas a lot of self-driving national parks, it's not really the case. It'll be like 12, 15 rand, but nobody really knows where that goes. So a lot of these high-end lodges, it's one of the things we forgot to mention. If you're going to a Singita or a Savannah or whatever, where you're paying a lot of money is actually going back to the community. It's going to upliftment. It's going to skills, which is really good. Savannah, for example, has got its own vet clinic. So they do a lot of work with the local communities where they vaccinate and neuter dogs and cats and all that kind of stuff. So without lodges, none of that happens. And if a lot of the communities, they're growing rapidly, if they get poorer or they don't have upliftment or they don't see the need to keep this reserve because it's not helping them, that's when poaching becomes bad and that's when animals disappear. So it's another.
Well, that's one thing that I've always liked about you. That's one thing that I've always liked about you and Kirsten and Panthera Photo Safaris. You guys are always very conservation minded. Am I right in saying that you guys also have a conservation Patreon account where people can make a donation to not necessarily specific conservation projects, but ad hoc issues where you guys support certain organizations when an emergency happens.
So we've got a conservation emergency fund, essentially. So we run it through Patreon, but we've also just launched an official non-profit company as well. So you can make any donations via our website, if you like, or contact us directly. But we've got this conservation fund essentially for whenever a vet rings up and says, listen, we've got a lion or a hyena or whatever with a snare. We need to get it now. We don't have money. We can send them money. So we actually just rescued 3 lion cubs from the illegal wildlife trade the other day. Someone contacted us and said, we need X amount of money. We're trying to raise it to try and get these lion cubs. Within 5 minutes, we said, go. Here's the money. Go and get them. And it was a successful sting. We got those cubs. We've done it for pangolins. We've done it for rhino dehornings. So anyone who can join and help, we show you where your money goes. All of that money goes directly into this fund. On Patreon, we put up pictures and things like that, so you get to see where the money went. And we don't have many, but the people that we have so far have saved hundreds of animals already, which is incredible. So thank you very much to our patrons we already have. Anyone else looking to join, we start at $3 a month, and everything helps. So we do appreciate it very much.
Yeah, we'll make sure to pop that link in the video description for anybody watching on YouTube. And if you're listening on Spotify, just head over to Patreon and search for the Panthera Photo Safaris Conservation Fund. Lance, so before we end off, as I mentioned earlier, we've got an exciting safari scheduled for next year that actually focuses on hide photography, underground hide photography specifically. Do you want to quickly tell the viewers a little bit more about the trip that we've got scheduled for sort of mid-2026?
Yeah, so next year in July, 14th to the 23rd of July, we're doing it's not a hides only because there will be a couple of game drives, but it's a hide photography workshop. So it'll be 2 vehicles, maximum 8 guests, so 4 guests per vehicle. 1 with Philia guiding, 1 with myself. And we'll be doing 5 nights at Mashatu. We'll be doing the Matabole hide and the Lala Limpopo sleep out hide. So everyone will get to go to the sleep out hide. Everyone will get to do 2 sessions in the Matabole hide with a couple of game drives as well. And then we're doing 4 nights at King's Camp, where we have access basically 24/7 to their hide, the King's Warren hide, and game drives. So there people can kind of pick and choose, or we can do game drives and we can sit in the hide at night because it's very good there at night as well. So it's in July, late July. If people are interested, details are on our website. I'll put a link wherever the linky thing goes here as well. And yeah, looking forward to that one.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that as well. It's obviously on the upper end of the price scale that we've just been talking about.
Yes.
But this is going to be coming back with an amazing portfolio of animal photographs. We're giving ourselves a chance to not only see a lot of predators, a lot of big cats, but also to photograph a lot of animals at eye level, spending time in these underground hides. And it's going to be a great opportunity for people to learn. When you sit in underground hides, you've got so much time to learn about depth of field, shutter speeds, and being creative. So for those of you that really want to come away with a very unique set of animal photographs and a great learning opportunity, this is the one. Because at King's Camp, they've just built a brand new photographic room where, not only it's a great place to sit and edit, but you can actually print some of your photographs as well. So that's at the end of our trip. You can print some of your favorite images there, roll them up, and take them back home.
And we purposely did it at the end so that Philia and myself can sit with you. We can go through your portfolios from the trip, pick the best one, and make sure you get a lekker souvenir to take home. So, very cool.
Well, listen, guys, for everybody that has stuck around with us right to the end, thank you very, very much. If you're still watching and you haven't subscribed yet to the Panthera Photo Safaris YouTube channel, do so right now. Click the little bell icon so you can be notified when the next videos come by. And we'll see you in the next podcast, Lance, whenever that might be.
Yeah, So I'm off now for about a month, so it won't be soon.
Take care, Lance. I'll see you next time.
Cheers, have a good one. Bye. And then roll outro.
Sweet.